I'm not sure whether we're live right now. Let's give this a refresh. There we go. Okay, if you can hear me, can you say something in chat for me, please? Oh, good. Hello. Thanks for confirming. Okay, we have a few people, I think a few people are just joining us still. Now okay, yes, I can see your messages. It's all functioning. Thanks for letting me know. I'll just give it a second. We've still got a few other people joining, and then we shall begin. Hi, everyone. Okay. All right, I think we shall get going. Great, I can see the messages as well. So I'm going to have a bit of time at the end so that you can ask questions then. But if there's anything pressing where you need me to pause and explain something a little bit more, then feel free to type that in the chat as well. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Camilla, the founder of Kin Learning. So we do 11 plus and maths and English tuition for ages 4 to 16. So we've been helping parents with their grammar school applications and the whole preparation process for several years now. So we get a lot of questions at this time of year about the preference forms for secondary schools, and it's a confusing process anyway, but especially with the exam results being delayed this year. I know quite a few of the parents are finding it difficult to know how to fill in the forms and get it all right, so I thought we would go through it in this evening session. Now, I have looked up the information for a few different local authorities and have also verified some of this information by calling them. So I'm kind of going with what seems to be happening generally and on average. However, please do bear in mind that our pupils come from several different boroughs and that sort of thing. So do double check just most of this information with your local borough, especially the number of school preferences, but all of the information about how to order your preferences will apply to every local authority. Okay, so let's get into our first slide. So applying for the secondary schools, you can select up to 6 schools. Now, there was a rumour that either Bexley or Kent Council were allowing parents to add an extra preference this year because of the delayed results. I haven't been able to verify that. I have tried, but haven't found anyone that is confirming that's true. So I would assume that there are 6, unless you hear otherwise from your local council. As I said, the rules will change depending on your borough. Apply by the 31st of October. I think Kent, the application date is 2 days later or so. So again, check that, but generally, and in previous years, the 31st of October has been the deadline date. After submitting your preferences, National Offer Day is on the 1st of March. For anyone watching this in later years, it's always around the 1st of March, sometimes the 2nd or so, at which point you will be told which of the 6 schools that you selected you have been, which ones you've been offered, and then you will have about 2 weeks to confirm that you would like to take that place to your local council. Big thing here, and that parents often worry about, is that the schools cannot see your preferences. So that applies across all boroughs, all areas. So if you have put a school as 4th choice or something, that doesn't mean that they're going to downgrade you and give a place to a child that ranked them further up. It's just, they're just told that you would like a place and then they allocate accordingly. So don't worry about how you rank the schools and whether that will count against you. And then your preferences will be ignored if you don't get into a school. So if you put a grammar school like 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and your child didn't get into those schools, then the application process will act as though you never selected those schools, they'll be wiped off, and then the next school that you're eligible for will effectively become your first choice. The other thing about the application process is you apply for all state schools through this process by the 31st of October. The private school application process and acceptance process is separate, so you need to apply directly to those schools and accept a place directly with the school. I will talk a little bit more about private schools at the end of the session. Okay, so applying to comprehensive schools. In your preferences, your 6 preferences, I always recommend going for a mix of comprehensives and grammars if you're applying to grammar school, otherwise it will just be comprehensives. But it's very important to be realistic. A lot of parents make the mistake of trying to kind of push the council into offering them the school that they want. So what I mean by that is if there are certain comprehensives that are local to you and you don't like them, then sometimes parents will apply for a school that they're very far away from, or they'll apply to a grammar school knowing that their child hasn't passed the exam, and will kind of think that if they just don't put anywhere nearby, then the council won't send them there. That's not how it works. So if you select a whole list of unrealistic choices for your secondary schools, and there are no places at those schools, then the council will choose a secondary school for you, and it may not be one on your list. So they will find a school that is the nearest one to you that is undersubscribed. So generally there will be schools that aren't getting great results or something, and that's why they're undersubscribed. So you won't get any of the preferences that were on your list, and the council will offer you a place at somewhere further afield, which can cause all sorts of problems. So although you may not love some of the schools in your area, please do try to remember to be realistic about which schools you're in the catchment for, which schools your child is eligible for. Otherwise, the council may give you a place that you don't like. Look at where your neighbours' children are going to school. So this is for the comprehensives. Looking around your street and the nearby streets at where the children go will give you an idea of whether you're likely to be in the catchment area for a school. Check the admissions policies on the school websites. A lot of them will give you an idea of the catchment area that they usually have, like how far away the students lived in different years, and that will help to give you an idea of whether you're within the school catchment. And then just make sure that you have at least 2 viable comprehensive school options on your application form, if not 3, just so that if it all goes wrong with the grammar school applications, which hopefully it won't, but if it does, then you've got some good choices that you will be happy with in the end. I'm going to move on to grammar schools just to check any questions about that at all. Anything that I've done, talking about on there. We'll move on to the slide. I think there's a slight delay, but do send me a message if you do have any questions. Okay, I shall move on unless I see something pop up. So grammar schools. Now I haven't linked to it yet, but those of you that got the email about this session have been given a link to our 11+ ebook. I'll put it in the description for this video as well. That's where I've detailed the catchment areas for different schools and their eligibility criteria. So if you want more information on that, then please have a look at the ebook. So I've just seen one question here. Do you get more than one offer once you submit your preferences? You don't. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides, but essentially you submit your preferences, they figure out which of the schools on your list you are eligible for, and they will offer you a place at the school that you ranked highest as if they can. So you get one offer, but you can request to be put on the waiting list for the other schools if you didn't get your first choice. So I will come back to that as well. Okay, so you can afford to put one long shot down, but make it worth it. So if there's a school like a Dartford or something like that, or an OLAVS, where you know it's very competitive, you know your child needs a very high score to get in there, then put that down, put it high up in your preferences, otherwise it's not going to count anyway, but just make sure that that's mixed in there with some more realistic options, just in case, some backup options. So I just seen another question. 31st of October, that is the date for submitting your applications this year. I'm trying to remember what the date was last year. I believe 31st of October is actually the date every year, because usually the 11 plus results would come out during the course of October, and then you just have a little bit of time to submit your preferences after the results. So yeah, 31st of October, it should be about that every single year, including this year. And then look at your child's journey beforehand. So some of the schools, as much as you may like them, it may be a very difficult journey for your child to get there. Sorry, I lost the train of thought because I saw a question. So check the journey online. TFL have a good journey planner, and just make sure that's realistic, because sometimes parents get a little bit carried away. They put a great school as their first preference, then realise that their child is going to have trouble getting there, and then they want to change, and then it's too late. So do just make sure that they're practical options before you put them down. And then, sorry, so should I see local schools? I forgot to add the grammar schools. Can I redo it? So if you need to change your preferences, you would need to ask your local council whether they will let you. I think usually they will. They will try and make some arrangements for you. They might give you a bit of flack for it, but it's up to the local councils. Okay, so I wanted to go through some examples of preferences and why they would be bad choices, and then I'll go through one of the good examples at the end. So as background here, you've got a parent that isn't keen on any of the local schools but really likes Bullerswood Girls, and they know already that they're unlikely to be in the catchment area for that school. So this would be one where the parent is kind of hoping that if they don't put anywhere else down as a comprehensive, then the council will have no choice but to give them an offer for Bullerswood. The thing is, they filled the first 5 places with grammar school options. So if their child didn't pass those grammar school exams and then they weren't in the catchment area for Bullerswood Girls, they would be offered, in this case, probably an undersubscribed school that would be even further away from their house and would probably be an undesirable option. What I would suggest instead, because Dartford and Tunbridge Girls need similar sorts of scores to get in, they're both covered by the Kent test, then I would pick one of those schools rather than putting both down. Same with Chisenstead and Bexley Grammar, they're covered by the same test. You'd need a similar sort of mark to get in. So I would look at the catchment area, where your house is in relation to that, and then pick an option between those. So then you've still got a mix of 3 different exam boards there. So if your child fails one exam but passes another one, then you've got some options, but then that would still give you room to put the comprehensive options. And then with regard to Bullerswood, let's say you were just out of the catchment. As long as you've got some other viable options on there, it might be worth putting Bullers down. You would need to put it higher than the schools that you are more likely to get into but less keen on, if that makes sense. So let's say you lived near Darwickwood but you preferred Bullers. You'd need to put Bullers and then Darwickwood, and then the council would be likely to offer you a place at Darwick. But then because you put Bullers higher, you would be able to ask to go on the waiting list. Sorry, I know that is confusing. We're going to keep going through some examples. But basically, have some viable options on there and put them in the order that you would actually like to go to them, not in order of how likely you are to get in. I will come back to that question in a second. Okay, next one. So this one, the family lives very near Cooper's School. They're guaranteed to be in catchment. They live far away from Langley Girls. But let's say they really like Langley Girls. It is good that they've put a couple of different comprehensive options in there. I think having only 2 is a bit of a risk. It would be better to have 3. And then the thing is here, they've put Langley Girls at the bottom. Now, let's say you prefer Langley Girls, but this family is closer to Cooper's. It would be better to swap them round. So just on the off chance that they get into Langley Girls, or, that there is a space, they would need to put that higher in order to be eligible for it. Okay, any questions around that? And I'll just look at these last couple of questions. Do you have to pass the test and then apply it, or the other way around? In normal years, you have to pass the test, you get your results, or you get an indication of your results, it's not guaranteed, and then you apply. This year, because of COVID, you have to apply and you don't get your results until the National Offer Day. Where to check for the average marks required for the grammar schools. Get the average marks in, those were all listed in the ebooks. That was last updated last year, so there may be slightly different information on the websites, but we've got several years of information in the ebook summarised for you, so that will give you an idea in there. Okay, if there are no more questions about that, I'll move on. Okay, then background here. So Newstead Wood is the family's first preference, but they're not sure their child will pass. They put Dartford Girls as it seems like the safer option. Just because a school is a safer option doesn't mean it's a good idea to put it first. Remember, if you don't get into a school, it will just be wiped from the application and it will be like it never existed. So it would be better to put Newstead first and then Dartford Girls if that's your preference. Then if they don't pass Newstead, it goes away. And then Dartford Girls acts like their first preference. What you do need to keep in mind though is, let's say this child got into Dartford Girls and passed the Newstead Wood exam, you wouldn't be able to then later say, actually, I don't want the Dartford Girls place and I'd like to take the Newstead Wood offer because you put Newstead Wood second. So if you want to have the option later, you need to put that school higher up and then you can ask to go on the waiting list. Again, this parent has only put 1 comprehensive offer option, which isn't a good idea. Okay. And then we have an example here, a good example. So this is a sensible list, I would say. So for the results that this child got, let's say they are placed on the waiting list for O-Levels. They're offered a space later in the year after their parents have accepted a place at Judd. So in this example, because the child didn't pass the O-Levels exam first time, that preference goes away and they are offered a place at Judd because they passed that exam. The parent can then say after National Offer Day, please could you put me on the waiting list for O-Levels? And then later in the year, if a space comes up, then they get an offer from O-Levels. At that point, even if you've accepted a place at Judd, you would be able to turn down that place later in the year and take up the O-Levels space, but only because O-Levels was put first or higher up than Judd. Okay, and then a couple of questions. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get into too many questions about chances of passing the 11+. It's just about the forms for the parents in year 6. But do you have to wait until National Offer Day to find out if a child passed the 11+? As far as I know, this year you do have to wait until National Offer Day. It may vary depending on which schools you're applying to though, because they all have their own separate procedures. So some of the schools might send out the mark or something, but as far as I know, everyone's just waiting till National Offer Day, which is annoying because I know it's a really long time to wait. Okay, and then not much longer. Just a couple of other slides, and then we can get into some more questions about preferences. So the Ideal application in summary, I'd say you can afford to put 3 grammar school choices, especially if your child's doing several exams. Try and mix up, if they are doing several exams, mix up the requirements and the exams, just so you can kind of hedge your bets. And then so have about 3 grammar school choices and then 3 comprehensive choices, just so you have some good backups. And then finally, the private schools. So private schools don't need to be on your general applications form. So of the 6 choices that you're submitting to your local council, the private school doesn't need to be on there, or the several private schools that you've applied to don't need to be on that application form. And what usually happens, and this is in a COVID year and in a general year, is that the private schools will let you know if you've passed the exam and offer a place in January or February of the year after you've taken the exams in January time. So you will get that offer in February. In March, you'll hear what's happened with your state schools and whether you've been offered a place at the school that you prefer. And then you usually have a week or so, maybe less, to apply for the private schools and let them know if you would like to accept the place at that school. I have checked a couple of the local schools, and their deadlines for acceptance seem to be around the 5th of March or so about 4 days after National Offer Day. I have seen some private schools, though, where the deadline for acceptance is the same day as the National Offer Day. So they're basically trying to make sure that you either accept or decline your place before you've learned whether you've got a state school place. So they're making sure that you do really want that private school place. So check the deadlines for the individual schools that you're applying to, but generally you'll have a couple of days to make that decision before you need to give them an answer. Okay, let's get into questions. Okay, catching up in terms of the 11 plus, it is very difficult to say whether your child would be able to catch up because they've missed school during COVID. There are a lot of kids in the same position, but it really depends on the child. So it would be difficult to give a verdict on that. Just read a couple of the other questions. So if you put grammar schools first and your child passes, can they change their mind and opt for the non-grammar? No. Well, people have called the councils and tried to see, but assume that they can't. So let's say, because we actually had a child that did this a while ago. So her parents were quite sure that she would get into Newstead because she had a good enough score, the early indication, but they decided that they wanted her to go to Langley more than they wanted her to go to Newstead. So what they did was put Langley first, Newstead second, and then the other state schools. So it meant that if they didn't get into Langley, the comprehensive, then they would be offered a place at Newstead. But if a place at Langley came up, they could still be informed about it. So if you think there is a chance that they want to go to a non-grammar or a comprehensive, then perhaps put those higher up in your preferences, higher than the grammar school options. You don't have to chunk them though, so you could put grammar, comprehensive, grammar, comprehensive, something like that. Do they have entrance exams for comprehensives too? They don't have entrance exams exactly, but what some of the schools are doing to make sure that they have a range of abilities is getting the children to take an exam before starting, and then they take a few of the top performers, a few of the middle performers, and a few of the bottom performers. So it's not that you need to do well in that exam, it's just that they want to take a variety, and it's kind of just lucky dip. But aside from that, no, they don't have entrance exams for comprehensives. How do you find out what the good comprehensive schools are in your area? Ofsted, exam scores, combination of both. So Ofsted reports and exam scores will be on the school websites. It's worth looking at both because it depends on what's more important to you. So some of the Ofsted reports and some of the schools have reviews online, but they're mostly by disgruntled parents, so they're taken with a pinch of salt. But the Ofsted report may give you an idea of the culture at the school and what kind of activities they have, and that may be more important to you than their average exam scores. So yeah, have a read of both. Also, I'm sure there will probably be parents in your area, or like a friend of a friend whose child is there, that can give you their recent experience as well. Is there a cut-off date to go on the waiting list? I believe you need to tell the council whether you want to go on the waiting list by the date of acceptance. So National Offer Day on the 1st of March, the 15th of March is usually the date that you need to accept by. And when you accept, you can tell them whether you want to go on the waiting list for a school. One thing I forgot to mention earlier actually is you can send off your preferences either online or by post. So for online applications, the offer day is the 1st of March. If you apply by post, they will get back to you by post, and they will post the results on the 1st of March. So you will get your results a day or two later than everybody else. So I would apply online just because I'm impatient and would want to know as soon as I can. What do grammar schools look for in a student? Grammar schools really just are looking for you to pass the exam. Private schools will interview and get more of a rounded view of the student, but the grammar schools, it's the exam only. It's nothing to do with personality and that sort of thing. It's just whether you get the highest mark. Okay, are there any more questions? Anything about the presentation that you didn't understand? Happy to look at some examples if you want me to. Can you be on the waiting list for more than one school? Yes, but those schools needed to be higher on your preference list than the one that you've been offered. So if you are offered your first choice school, then you can't then go on the waiting list for schools that you put lower down, because this council is assuming that you got what you wanted, and so you don't need to go on the waiting list. Anyone else? Okay, I will wrap up in a second if there aren't any more questions, but happy to answer any others that may come through. If you are typing and you want me to wait, perhaps if you could just type wait in the box so that I know to hang around. Don't want to miss you off. Okay, I think I will wrap up there in that case. Okay guys, I hope this has been helpful. Oh, there's a question. Is it correct that we can change our preferences in a short period after the 31st of October? I have not been able to verify that. I had heard the rumour. But as someone else said, if you change your mind, some of the councils may allow you to change your preferences as almost a gesture of goodwill. But I would assume that what you put down is what you need, what you have to, what you will be sticking with. So think about it carefully. You don't have to, there's no advantage to applying before the 31st of October. Just make sure you get it in by the deadline, so you can hold off and see how the preferences sit with you and whether you're still happy about it. Do GL style exams test your writing, your descriptive writing skills? Depends on the school. The Kent test, there is a descriptive writing section. However, that section is only looked at in the case of a tie or an appeal. So if in a tie, two children got the exact same mark and lived in the exact same place, or exactly as far away from the school as the other, then they would look at the descriptive writing, or if there is some sort of appeal, they'll look at it. So hopefully with the Kent exam, no one will ever need to look at that writing because your child will just pass. But it depends on the it depends on the school. They can put it in if they want. Will you need super high marks if the grammar school is not in your catchment area? That also depends on the school. Definitely have a look at the ebook for answers to that. So some of the Kent schools, a selection of them, they will save places for those with very high marks that are out of the catchment area. Some schools like Newstead, they are just taking, there's a 9-mile radius, the catchment area, and they will just take people on the basis of their scores within that catchment. And then Others will do it just on the basis like Bexley. Once you pass, the score is ignored and it's to do with catchment. So it varies massively. Have a look in the ebook and then it will tell you which ones are which. So for example, if you live in Orpington but look for Tunbridge Wells, certain Tunbridge Wells schools will save places for those with super high marks. Some of them won't. Okay. You're welcome, those of you that have said thanks, and someone's just said wait, so I will wait. Oh, sorry, I've just shown the comment, I didn't mean to do that. I will hold off just for any last questions. So I will put the link in the description for this immediately after this session, so if you refresh in a couple of minutes, then you should be able to get the link, or if you're watching this later, then it will be there. That ebook, I think I said earlier, was updated last year, so do just double check the information, but it should be a good starting point for you. Okay, you're very welcome. Feel free to head off if you've got everything you need, but I will just wait for a couple of minutes for any last questions. Thanks for joining me. You're leaving now. Okay. Is the Trinity School exam different to St. Olave's? Yes, it is. And it should be a little bit easier. So I believe Trinity have past papers on their website, and the Olave's exam, they have some sample papers on there, so you can have a little look at the comparison. If your child gets into Olave's or gets close, they should be able to pass the Trinity exam. Sutton, do they judge on descriptive writing? My memorization of the Sutton exam is not great, but I believe they do, but check the applications website. Okay, I think that's everyone, and you're very welcome, and thank you very much for joining me, and I will head off now. Okay, bye.